Hi, Jennifer Warren here, and today I have with me Gijs Overgoor from SMU Cox School of Business, and we are going to talk about another paper, and the title of it is The Champion of Images, a NeuroAI Framework for Understanding Images on Consumer Decision Making. And you're also going to be presenting this next week in New York at a conference. Thanks for being here and taking the time to talk about your research.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so, and just jumping in about this research, it's about AI usage and machine learning, and you're sort of teasing out how consumers process ads. What do you want to say about this study of images and the click-through behavior contained in this research?
Yeah, so basically what we started off with was this question about, how do images online, how do they influence consumer decisions and consumer clicks? And we talked to a global online travel agency a couple years back, and they wanted to understand this question. And so when we started thinking about it, we felt the natural approach was, hey, we can use machine learning, some of these computer vision models to answer these questions. And the problem with these models is that they're often a black box, right? Either um, you try to work with this black box by thinking very extensively beforehand about what kind of elements do we want to measure in this image, or afterwards we kind of ask the model, hey, what kind of predictions did you make? What kind of features drove these predictions? And both of these kind of fall short because they don't really give us insight into the consumer response to these images. And so the next question then became, oh, can we perhaps use something that is much closer to the consumer subjective experience? And can we actually look in consumers' brains to answer this question? And we did that with an fMRI experiment where we basically measured the blood flow and blocks oxygenation in response to several of these images, and we saw that there's definitely differences in images that do well versus images that don't do well in the way that they're processed visually in the visual cortex. The problem with that one is that you only have 100 images, and it's very costly and it's very time consuming. And so our idea was, well, what if we can bridge both and present a framework that can take the scale of machine learning with the insights of neuroscience? And that's how we came with our NeuroAI framework that can uh, give these insights at scale.
Yeah, that's sort of like you actually kind of answered this question I was going to ask in a little bit about what does neuro AI do. But before we go there, so why is this important? This what you have done, what you have uncovered, basically.
Yeah, I mean, as consumers, we spend considerable amount of time online, and we are visual people, right? We process a lot of our information visually, and research has demonstrated that visuals have a very large impact on our decisions.
Mhm.
Images are everywhere, videos are everywhere, so visual content is just very important for marketers. And
Mhm.
at the same time, we don't have really effective tools to measure the effectiveness of these visuals. And so there's a lot of work that's still to be done about what the best way of measuring the impact of visuals on consumer decisions is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you sort of describe the approach you take to exploring the effectiveness of images? And I guess this kind of does get at this neuro AI. Can you kind of like high level, talk about what it's about and this idea of processing fluency that you kind of get at too?
Yeah. So the idea is that um, neuroscience provides us with rich insights. And so we can see, hey, if a consumer looks at this image, this is what lights up in the brain, or this is the part of the brain that gets activated. Um, and again, the problem with that is that it's very small scale, and the machine learning has this black box problem. And so we basically want to open up this black box by using the brain and training a machine learning model that can take an image and directly predict the brain response. And so our goal here was to take this very large data set of 73,000 images
Hmm.
with 8 participants that spent hours in this fMRI machine to just map out this response of image to brain response,
Hmm.
especially in the visual cortex, because the way that we visually process images is pretty universal. Whether we look at a nature image or we look at a product image, visually we process it structurally in very similar ways.
Hmm.
What matters or what areas are important for us marketers is then the next question. And so that's what we went about with this NeuroAI framework is, okay, now that we can train a model that can predict these brain responses, and we can do this at scale, how can we tie these brain responses then to decisions? And does that make sense? And one of the features that came forward is this idea of processing fluency, or this idea that more activation in the brain means more cognitive demand, more blood flow. And so there's some work out there that says visual complexity can be harmful or can be cognitively demanding. And so that's one aspect that we find, and we indeed find that more cognitive demand or higher processing power necessary hurts click-through rates for hotels, and also hurts demand for properties. But we also found this other region, which is pretty interesting and very relevant to the property marketing space, which is this idea of navigational affordance, or this region of the brain in the visual cortex that is responsible for navigating spaces
Hmm.
and for spatial awareness. And we found that activation in that area of the brain actually is positively correlated with both click-through rates and demand.
Right. Yeah, that is really interesting. So what is that about spatial, awareness? How would you, describe that simply, your finding with that, those affordances?
Yeah, I think the most simple explanation is if there is a almost like a visible path that you can take, so that if you look at an image, it's almost like you know where to go, or you know how you can walk around. And
Yeah.
tying this to property marketing, I think it makes a lot of sense because you're deciding whether you're going to stay in an Airbnb, or you're deciding if you're going to like a hotel stay. And so you imagining being there, you imagining walking around the space, if the images allow you to do that, then that would be helpful.
Right. And then your other finding, it can't be too complicated. It can't be too complex. So yeah, so there's
Yeah, and this
kind of
is
like,
and that's more I think more closely related to just the general demands of browsing online. We all know that searching for information can be overwhelming. We're presented with a lot of information, and so the images are a way of quickly processing information. But
right.
if that is too demanding,
Yeah.
then we kind of turn off.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, those are really cool findings, and it's really cool that it's so, relevant to, I know that you looked at some Airbnbs too, and I guess we can hop over to some of your findings. So what were some of your findings and results that you spoke to regarding property marketing and marketing in general?
Yeah, so when we did our pilot fMRI, these two measures or these two areas kind of came about: this early visual processing, cognitive demand, and then this navigational affordance area in the brain. And so we put that, we ran our images for both the Airbnb data that we had and for some of these hotel images that we had, and we tested it with respect to click-through rates. And then we also created this kind of managerial experiment of what if we present a property with all the same spaces in a low navigational way versus a high navigational way. And so
Mm-hmm.
just using original pictures, real life pictures of a hotel, but ones that are showing this space more navigable and the other less navigable. And we found that it indeed increases the booking likelihood. And
Right.
so then we applied this to over 3,000 properties in New York for an Airbnb data set. And we found that indeed these same patterns hold. Cognitive demand is something that decreases the booking likelihood or the demand of a property, and the navigational affordance increases the booking likelihood of a property. And we optimizing these images based on our estimations can lead to an improvement of demand of close to $1,000
Yeah, I
in
saw.
annual revenue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw that. That's like per property annually, and you add
Yeah.
a bunch of properties. That's really big.
Yeah, it can add up rapidly if you have a
Yeah.
portfolio. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that was actually my other question about downstream revenue effects, and we sort of talked about that. So basically, I want to ask you kind of like a big picture question to kind of maybe wrap, and that's, you talk about that this is like a paradigm shift, brain-based measurement, and that it applies to many industries. Can you kind of talk about that?
Absolutely. We've already started talking to um, other companies. Have presented this a few times, and there's appetite of learning more about how consumers respond, especially when you add the brain part. That piques the
Yeah.
interest, and I think it can just be a really effective way of getting opening this black box, getting new insights, and you can imagine that. There's a wide variety of areas in which we would want to know, what is happening in the consumer's brain, and something that you can think of is, new designs of products, or maybe a car. Is there a certain response that we would like to elicit in the brain, and then can we create a model like this that can do that for us, or that at least can get us closer to it,
Mhm.
or there's a recipe pictures or pictures of food items on the menu. There's areas in the brain responsible for processing food, or maybe for appetite. That could be an interesting use case. And
Wow.
then, we don't have to limit ourselves to just images. We can think about videos. We can think about designing a retail experience. Um, I think there's a lot of work to do, and I think it is an exciting space
No,
to
absolutely.
explore.
Yeah. The sky's the limit on how you could apply this, in fact, to all these physical settings and then the online mirroring of that. Just out of curiosity, how would you see this manifesting with text, for example?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it will be a little bit less about the visual experience, or the visual processing, but there's certainly research out there in neuroscience that shows that you can measure responses in the brain to textual advertising, or kind of news articles, headlines, that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
so uh, and since text is measurable almost in a similar way as images, with today's methodology and machine learning, I think we can do some similar things. And at the same time, these LLMs have also been garnering more interest from the neuroscience community. So
Oh,
it'll
sure.
be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and we just talked about your other paper on LLMs, and so we kind of have these like companion pieces of getting at really.
Yeah, maybe we should merge the papers. Yeah.
It would be a really massively big paper, wouldn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I think
Um,
if we can first get these individual components in a nice journal, then we can start thinking about
right,
the
right, right. Yeah,
yeah.
the mega paper,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
the large language paper. Uh,
That's a very good way of putting it.
yeah. Well, thanks for your time, and good luck in New York, in
Yeah,
at
thank you
the
so much.
conference. And I know it's going to be really insightful to be around all those researchers and top firms in the space. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.